In the late 1990s, the gaming industry was booming with genre-defining titles in both the RPG and survival horror genres, setting the stage for a unique title like Koudelka to make its mark. Released in 1999 for the original PlayStation, Kodelka was a game that dared to combine gothic horror elements with turn-based RPG mechanics. Though it wasn't the blockbuster hit its developers may have hoped for, it certainly left an impression on those who experienced it. At a time when games like Final Fantasy VIII and Resident Evil 3 dominated their respective genres, Kodelka dared to blend elements of both RPGs and horror to offer a hybrid experience. Developed by Sacnoth, a studio formed by Square developers, the game was poised to attract fans of story-driven, atmospheric games.
What's going on?
The game follows Koudelka Isant, a young psychic who explores the haunted halls of a monastery in 1898, battling monsters and uncovering the secrets of a dark mystery along the way. What sets Kodelka apart is its ambition to merge two very distinct styles. Its tactical, grid-based combat is a far cry from the action-heavy mechanics typical of horror games, while its eerie atmosphere and dark story contrast with the usual heroic fantasy themes more commonly found in RPGs. This bold experimentation was both its strength and its weakness. On one hand, it offered something fresh and intriguing for players who were looking for a new type of experience. On the other hand, the execution wasn't always smooth, and the game's slow pacing and unusual blend of genres left some players feeling disconnected with their experience. In this video, we will explore how Kodelka fits within the larger gaming landscape of its era, examine its gameplay and narrative structure, and reflect on its legacy as a cult classic. By understanding where the game succeeded and where it faltered, we can better appreciate its place in gaming history, and its impact on the Shadow Hearts series that would soon follow. Hi, I'm Benny, and like a lot of gamers, I've got a backlog of games that I've heard about but never actually played. Today, we're diving into one of those forgotten curiosities of the PS1 era. So, grab a snack, pull up your blankie, and join me as we unravel the mystery of just what the fuck Kodelka is all about. To fully appreciate Kodelka's design and ambition, we need to look at what was going on in the gaming industry in 1999. 1999 was a year dominated by genre-defining titles. In the RPG space, Final Fantasy VIII set a new bar for cinematic storytelling and visual presentation. Meanwhile, the survival horror genre thrived, with Resident Evil 3 releasing that year, solidifying Capcom's mastery of tension-filled gameplay. Against this backdrop, Kodelka stood as an attempt to merge the depth and strategy of RPGs with the eerie atmosphere of horror games. However, Square, just 1 year prior, had already released Parasite Eve, which aimed to tackle the horror RPG fusion to great success. The developers at Sacnoth, led by Hiroki Kikuta, were ex-Square employees keen on creating something that diverged from the more traditional high fantasy RPG formula. Their vision for Kodelka was ambitious, an experience that would combine the tactical grid-based combat with a narrative steeped fully in gothic horror. The game's release was met with curiosity, as few titles had attempted to blend the genres so directly. However, this also meant that Kodelka had to compete with the giants of both genres, which would inevitably lead to divided opinions. While Kodelka didn't achieve the commercial success of Final Fantasy VIII or Resident Evil 3, its unique approach set it apart from other games of the era. By positioning itself as a genre hybrid, it invited players into a new kind of experience, though one that was not without its challenges. Understanding the competitive landscape of the time only highlights the significance of Koudelka's attempt to blend genres, but it also sheds light on why its execution may have struggled to fully capture the attention of mainstream audiences. So, let's go ahead and jump into the story of Kodelka with disc 1 of 4. That's right, 4 discs. But we'll get to that. And in this process, we are going to cover the story from start to finish, disc 1 to 4, going through the mechanics, going through the narrative, going through the characters, and all the events that play out in the game. This will be full spoilers, just so you are aware, and we will also be tackling all of the secrets the game has to offer as well. Now that you've been warned, let's jump in to what exactly Kodelka is. We open with a CG cutscene of someone riding on horseback through a misty forest, while a woman sings a hauntingly ethereal melody in the background. The rider stops atop a hill overlooking the monastery by the sea, and we fade to a black screen with the setting told to us. We find ourselves in Wales on Halloween night, 1898. I forgot this was the date that the game takes place on, and now I'm kind of wishing I saved this for the end of the month, but here we are. Next, we see the rider knocking on the monastery doors before examining the nearby wall and removing her hood. The woman begins to scale the monastery, and we get a wide sweeping shot of the building and courtyard before the woman nearly falls from the roof, dropping some kind of object before breaking the window and entering into the monastery. Once inside, we see a man who is slumped against a wall with wounds and holding a gun. And this is where we get our first bit of dialogue and the FMVs. The FMVs in Kodelka are all surprisingly high quality with rather good voice acting, in, if not sometimes, cringy writing. Anyways, we get thrown around by a monster, and the guy throws us his gun, prompting us to start our first combat sequence. Right out the gate.
Here, use this.
Combat starts, and here we are introduced to the command menu and the layout of what all the battles in Kodelka are going to look like. We see that our character's name is Kodelka, so we are playing the title character. We have an HP and MP section, just like most RPGs to keep track of, and the usual commands of action, move, wait, and status. We have the freedom to move around on a grid to either close in on enemies, or we can use the distance for ranged weapons. Enemies can also move around on the board and utilize the same tactics against us. We're kind of playing a small game of chess here, as these aren't large-scale tactical maps like some other RPGs such as Fire Emblem use. These are all the same board, and you have a couple of rows on both sides of the map, the enemy side and the player side. And this is what we will see for the duration of the game. The action command involves your attack, magic, items, and weapon options. And after a few rounds from our handgun, the monster ends up going down and we get our first experience points. Our first item drops, being a normal knife and a SA pistol, which should probably be put on a watch list for whatever it did, the flare spell, and some Roman nuts. Quite a handful for our first combat. Lastly, the combat flow in Kodelka will feel a bit sluggish right now, but that doesn't mean that it can't improve later, right? Right? We load back into the map and are greeted by something I am a personal fan of. Pre-rendered backgrounds. And some Resident Evil tank controls to go along with them. So, shrugging off getting bowling ball blasted through a wall and fighting off a monster, we open up our menu and we see what all we have going on here. We have a heal command, which utilizes spare healing items and spells to heal the party. Status for checking out our characters. Equip. Items. Map. And config, which are all pretty standard. And then we have formation, which when we click on it takes us to a chessboard with one piece on it and Kodelka's name, which we can then move around to set where a character starts combat at on the tactical board. We proceed back to the injured guy and get an in-game cutscene where the man is dying and we heal his wounds with some magic as thanks for letting us use his gun against the monster. We are also given some really odd dialogue of the two arguing and the man introducing himself.
I'm Edward J. Plunkett. I know I look pretty shady, but you don't look too wholesome yourself.
No, I'm
so,
not like you.
after Edward joins our party, we finally get to start exploring the monastery. And right here from the start, Kodelka sets out to show you both aspects of its gameplay. That it is a tactical RPG that attempts to blend the grid-based combat with the tension and atmosphere of survival horror, as we've already stated a few times up to now. However, almost immediately after the intro sequence, we start to see that the game's mechanics are going to struggle to fully harmonize these two genres as we start to explore the derelict halls of Nemeton Monastery. And already, this is where we're going to talk about a design flaw this early on, because it is something that is apparent throughout the game from start to finish. While exploring the area, we find some items and, oh, look, some ammo. Which means guns aren't just going to always work. We'll need to conserve some items like in Resident Evil or Silent Hill. Item conservation is a big part of survival horror. But survival horror games are designed in a way for players to either fight the enemies standing in their way or try to escape from them in active environments. The problem here being that we have an inactive environment. Here, we have random encounters in an empty world with unknown amounts of enemies per encounter. So the probability of burning through ammo is relatively high, and running from combat means we lose out on valuable experience points to level up our characters. And speaking of random encounters, that old classic RPG system, Kodelka has great scenery in its backgrounds that are just dripping with atmosphere. But we can't see the monsters that inhabit this place, making every room feel empty as a result. Random encounters work for RPGs and have for a long time. However, when trying to make a survival horror game, a lot of the tension is built by seeing what lies between you and your goal and braving the turn of that dark corner you can't see around. In Kodelka, every step you take is that dark corner hiding that most vile of creatures. RNG. We'll circle back on this point later. I just wanted to get that seed planted because, well, we're going to be talking about it a bit. After a couple of combat encounters, we level up, and we get 4 stat points to distribute. A really cool thing about Kodelka is that you can kind of build the characters in whatever way you want, and each stat has a meaningful impact to progression. When you level up, you're not just locked into this character's stats all get slightly better. You get to decide how they improve. And they are all, as we said, meaningful to your progression, including luck. Luck is very important in this game, as I would find out way too late. And on top of just leveling your characters being fully customizable, different equipment will boost those characters' stats, both in positive and negative ways, when you equip items to a character. Now, as for the stats you have to play around with, you have strength, which is how hard you hit, dexterity, how accurate you hit, agility, how often you take turns. Yes, this stat determines how many turns you get in combat, vitality, how many hits you can take before death, intelligence, how strong your magic is, piety, how resistant to magic you are, mind, which is how accurate you are with magic, and luck, which has no noticeable application early in the game, but it has a direct effect on how good of items enemies will drop in combat. The game does not tell you this. It just says its effects may not be apparent, but it is important. It does not tell you what luck does, and unless you know what it does, you probably won't be able to understand that it's doing its job or not. I'll show you very specific examples of this later. Back to the game. We continue on and we find the kitchen area, and to my surprise, there are other people here. The monastery is not completely empty. We have NPCs now. We meet an older couple who introduce themselves as the caretakers of the monastery, and they offer us some food. Never mind them hearing gunshots and screams coming from abominations outside their door in the hallway. But Edward starts chowing down while Kodelka rejects the offer. We leave, and Edward confronts Kodelka about how rude she was to the couple, and she responds with an aloof,
"Yeah, if it weren't poison, then I would have had some."
Edward then starts panicking, but Kodelka heals him again, and we are free to continue exploring while letting the caretakers think that we're dead?
It's safer if we pretend we're dead and...
But that wouldn't make much sense, because Kodelka didn't eat any of the poisoned food. Anyways, while we're running around this new area, let's go over another big part of the game real quick. And one that I find very interesting. The item randomizer. With the game's random item system, players find items either through random enemy drops or by exploring the game's environment. The items, including weapons and healing supplies, vary widely in effectiveness, but their distribution is all RNG or world placement. Weapons, armor, and accessories are all randomized when you hit new game, which can result in some pretty cool or very frustrating outcomes based on your luck. As in you, the player, not the in-game luck stat. Although that does play into it a bit, kind of. What I mean is, every time you find a weapon, its stats and its elemental affinity will be rolled on the loot table. So if you pick up a knife, it might just be a normal knife with no extra element or effect attached. Or it could be something like a fire knife with different stats and effectiveness versus enemies. The possible item types include normal, mystic, fire, water, air, earth, dark, light, and vital. With this system, some players may find themselves overwhelmed with powerful items early on, while others could struggle with underwhelming gear, leading to an imbalanced experience since it is all randomized. So, I guess you could say that Kodelka has a roguelite element to the game, which is kind of cool. Finally, along with weapons and armor being random on pickup, weapons also have durability. Or at least melee weapons do. I don't remember any gun breaking on me in the playthrough, but this further complicates things just a bit, as you know that really good weapon you've been using? Well, it can just break in the middle of combat, and you'll need to use whatever else you have stocked up until you find something else that you want to use. This leads into the next system. Weapons and spells also level up the more that you use them, making the character more effective with them. And when I say that, I mean weapon types, not the weapons themselves, because those will break and inevitably you will lose them along the way. Now, this leveling system really only increases damage or number of hits in the case of spells and weapons. So let's say Edward reaches level 3 in axes. Level 3 is the max of a weapon level you can achieve. He's very effective when using axes, but everything else is at 0. Then the air axe you have been sweeping with breaks mid-battle. Now you need to change equipment, and if it isn't an axe weapon, you become humbled very quickly with how little damage and effectiveness that you will be able to put out to the enemies. So that is something to keep in mind. Variety is the spice of life and all that. Now, we continue on until we reach the greenhouse, and we find someone unconscious on the floor before we are attacked by our first boss. The evil plant! Or at least that is what the wiki says this boss is. Now, as far as first bosses go, I wasn't expecting anything too extreme, but a giant rosebud was not what I was expecting at all with how the game started out. The battle starts, and immediately we realize this thing is going to be tanky for us, as Kodelka is only dealing 18 damage with the handgun. So we run Edward forward with his mighty hammer, and by round 2, he goes in to bash that bush and heals it. Oh, wait, the light hammer is strong in stats, but the plant is light element. We have Kodelka change strats here and cast Flare, the fire spell, which deals at least 40 damage, which is better than 18, but this boss probably has hundreds of health, so we're gonna be here for a minute. Next up, we swap out Edward's weapon to the Vital Pipe and keep on casting Flare with Kodelka. Now, with the Vital Pipe, when Edward hits, it might be lower damage, but he will heal himself each time for the same amount, allowing him to be a pretty good tank up front. We have a couple of minutes with the boss here, so again, let's just go over the details about these compounding systems real quick while the fight plays out in action. See, the freedom in the leveling system is a nice touch, but it's undermined by a lack of meaningful combat variation. Players are encouraged to diversify their characters, but the shallow enemy AI that we encounter means that there's little need to actually adjust strategies. Instead, a straightforward approach tends to work regardless of build choices. This is kind of reducing the impact of the player's decision making. Along with this, when you level up, the characters are healed to full health and MP, which means that with the fast pace that you end up leveling in this game, it is entirely possible to play through the game without ever needing to actually engage with any of the healing items. The random item system further complicates all of this, as it introduces an unreliable element to the player progression. While randomness can add tension in horror games, in Kodelka, it often just feels arbitrary rather than strategic. The inconsistent nature of item drops can make some sections unnecessarily difficult or other times completely trivial, depending on the player's luck, which detracts from all of the strategic depth that the game seems to be wanting to hit. Though both systems offer potential for depth and engagement, they often miss the mark due to its uneven implementation of them. Well, back to the story. Eventually, Kodelka finishes off Audrey 3, Edward levels up, and we get the Icon's Necklace. A key item, not an accessory. And this key item does eat up one counted inventory slot. You do not have separate inventories for key items and regular items in Kodelka. We'll see why this might be a bit of an issue later. So we run back to the unconscious man, and we learn that this priest's name is James O'Flaherty. The caretakers welcomed him in, and that he was exploring the grounds before encountering the giant plant. James then joins us, and this is where we learn about a new part of the game. Holy water fountains. Save points, where we also full restore HP and MP for the whole party whenever we interact with them. Now, after saving our game and checking out James's stats, we find that he joins the party at level 1. So we have some character level discrepancies to work around. We spend a bit of time grinding a couple of levels and getting a few equipment drops in the courtyard before we enter the next area. And the gang starts to argue over religion just as someone starts firing gunshots through the windows. We rush on, and when trying to open the next set of doors, the message, "The door is being held shut by some mysterious force. When you try to open it, a monster attacks you," appears, and we are thrown into boss fight number 2. There is staggering little time between the plant boss and now if you take the small grind out of the equation. Onto the door obelisks. Floating pillars that each hold a monocolored crystal that looks like the Eye of Sauron with different colored contact lenses. Now, I've seen these enemies referred to as Watchers, Finders, Obelisks, Pillars, and Door Guardians, so really just take your pick at what you want to call them. This boss fight isn't terribly difficult. We just need to keep Edward on physical pressure, Koudelka using her spells, and James can kind of just fill in either position off to the side. He's kind of a bench warmer right now, but we need to watch out for what elements we use, as the green Watcher is air element, blue is water, and red is fire. So don't cast flare on the red one and heal it by mistake. Color coding and elements make sense, all that. Focusing our efforts onto one at a time means that before long, all 3 of the finders are destroyed and our path forward is open. We also pick up a couple of weapons and the tornado spell from the fight, further expanding our arsenal. Venturing on, we enter down into the dungeons of the Nemeton Monastery, and as we explore, we enter into crumbling rooms littered with old corpses while being attacked by zombie arms and skeletal remains. We enter into a side room and a cutscene plays out where Kodelka talks about feeling the spirits and, well, let's let this one play out, shall we?
Oh, my head hurts.
I got a bad feeling about this.
Horrible. Dear Lord, please save these lost souls.
This must have happened a long time ago. Oh, and the power is so strong. If I can channel some of these spirits, maybe I can find out what happened here.
Channel the spirit? Shame on you. You two should be praying for their souls.
The spirits floating in this room. I can let them possess my body so they can talk. Oh, the reason I came here is I heard the cry of one particular female voice. She was...
I will not stand for this. Not only do you not believe in God, but now you're going to disturb the spirits?
Shut up! Would you stop bothering me? Chains and darkness. Death. Oh no. There were so many of them. This is hell.
What? What's going on?
They were imprisoned and tortured and thousands of them.
Kill them! They cut off my fingers. They crushed my legs. They smashed my head and cut out my guts. They took everything from me. They locked me up and chopped my body.
Oh, my eyes! Oh, my ears! Oh, they're burned! Help! Help!
Look, I may have some issues with the game and the story, but Kodelka has some pretty great moments, particularly in its cutscenes. These are unfortunately sandwiched between valleys of mediocre gameplay, but you gotta give props where props are due. So we get control back and go to check the contents of the room, including the wardrobe, where we get an attempt at a jump scare by a mummy in a wedding dress, and the next scripted fight begins with the mummy in a wedding dress. Now, we're not going to be super hypercritical about every single thing this entire time. I will talk about parts I like, and we're going to do that right now, because one of my favorite parts about this game are the enemy designs, which until now have been somewhat unique. But from this point forward, we start to see some really cool stuff. The mummy bride is a mummified corpse that walks out of the closet in an old decayed set of rags that one would have assumed would have been a wedding dress, and is capable of throwing crates, barrels, and other scraps at the party members. Now, this fight isn't terribly difficult, but just throw some spells at her and maybe have Edward get in a couple of swings, and we finally put her to rest without too much of a fuss, leveling up and obtaining the earth spell Megalith for our trouble. Checking the closet after the mummy fight, we find a rope ladder rolled up, and we take it with us. We venture further into the dungeons, and around the corner we get another FMV where Edward almost walks off of a ledge while following a spooky ghost child.
Hey. Hey. Wait a minute. Hey.
Edward!
You should have just died for it. I wanted you to lay down and die.
A ghost?
Kodelka snaps him out of it, and using the rope ladder we picked up, we descend to the lower level of the dungeons. Now, the amount of cutscenes that come up in this game can be quite jarring and breaks up the exploration quite a bit. It might be a strange point of note, but the entire reason that Kodelka is 4 discs long is because of how many cutscenes and FMVs the game has in it. you can beat the game in roughly 10 hours without the need to grind with some good item drops, if you know where you're going. Final Fantasy VIII, which came out the same year, was 4 discs in length, and takes roughly 40 hours, give or take, to finish depending on how much you explore, if that helps put it into perspective a little more. So, we continue exploring the dungeon and we get the message, something's not right. And inside, we find a red glass piece on the floor before getting attacked by ghostly versions of the party. That's right, Kodelka uses the old mirror match trick on us, and now we have to beat a copy of our party to continue. But not an exact copy of a party, because none of them have any equipment. They're all just ghosts. Seeing as how Ghost Edward doesn't have a weapon, nor do any of them have a weapon, yet Kodelka immediately starts the fight by readying a spell, we can assume that James will be doing the same thing after he runs back to the back corner. So we position Edward in front and start casting on James in the back row, and here's where we can talk about that stat piety just a little more. See, you've probably seen it happen a couple of times already, but Kodelka has really, the character, not the game, has really high piety for this point in the game. And because of that, most spellcasting enemies cannot damage her with magic attacks. Same with James, and opposite with Edward, as shown here. The bad part about piety being high is that if we need to cast healing magic on a character, their piety stat can also nullify healing magic if it is too high, which is kind of a wild balancing act to deal with later on. The fight goes pretty smoothly with Edward just tanking hits and Kodelka and James throwing out spell after spell without much issue, and we move on. After beating the Kodelka imposters, we put the stained glass piece into the window, and a set of numbers show up with a message prompt reminding us about a safe on the second floor. So, we go back to the second floor. We open the safe, and inside we find the guard's diary, which now lets us use the last option in the menu. Read. The guard's diary is a series of dated journal entries written by a new guard at Nemeton Prison, and his experiences in witnessing of events within its walls. We find out that the prison housed inmates that may not have even committed crimes, but might have merely been innocent bystanders who heard or saw too much and were sent away as not to cause trouble for those with power. The prisoners being locked away, forgotten, tortured, and even killed without ever having committed a crime. In other words, a prison of injustice. The entries are pretty decent in length and paints a very clear picture of what happened in the prison long before our group wound up here. But I should note that the read section is completely optional and only has, I believe, one in-game change associated with it that removes one boss fight from the game if you find all of the pieces or if you find a certain lore piece. Otherwise, it is entirely possible to miss all of the collectibles and still finish the game. Heading back down to the lower level and through the door in the stained glass room, we are greeted by this fast-paced cutscene.
Koudelka, did you find anything?
No, nothing, but...
Who's that?
And after about 3 hours, without counting time spent taking notes, probably 2 hours, we are on to Disc 2. Disc 2 starts, and after falling onto a pile of corpses, no big deal, we investigate the cell doors where James and Edward argue more, and the ghost child shows back up, giggling at our predicament. We make her angry, and she disappears, leaving a ghost matador fencer to fight us? And here is where the first difficulty spike comes in. Now, we kind of over-leveled by the game standards with how linear the experience is in Disc 1, that even though the boss is of a higher level, we're pretty even with it. Kodelka has a difficulty spike roughly every disc, but strangely, if you play to the character's strengths, you should never be under-leveled and shouldn't need to run from any fights. So, in that sense, you should never be overwhelmed by the monsters on any disc, save maybe disc 4. But we'll cover that when we get there. We beat the spirit and the wall crumbles, opening our path forward. We run through a couple of torture chambers and find some new weapons, and some new enemy types. I particularly like this one. It's just a zombie with glass shards sticking out of its body, and it attacks you by ramming into you with the shards. They thought about how monsters would attack based on their designs, which is a really nice touch, and it's also just really nice to not see a generic swipe done by everything. Monsters are starting to get extra turns on us now, which means that they are starting to have higher agility stats than our party members. So we're going to have to fix that. In the next room, we see a machine, and when interacting with it, it asks us if we want some acid. We currently don't have anything to put it in, so we'll have to come back later. Backtracking for progress is here. We head into the next room, which looks like a sanctum covered in these purple vine growths with a statue standing on the far side, and get that something's not right here message again. What the game is really trying to tell you with this is that when you see this message, you are about to get into a boss fight. So, we walk forward and boom, boss fight. And I love this boss. Walking into the room, we encounter the Mad Fly, or Dark Priest, depending on who you talk to. I've heard both. This is where Kodelka starts hitting on an eldritch horror level in its designs and scope, and God, this thing rocks. I'll read its bestiary description and then we'll move on. Formerly a chaste and pious man, extensive mutations have rendered it inhuman. Hidden away underground, it waits patiently for suitable prey that it may lay its larva in. As a cruel irony, the desire to breed is its only motivation. This is what I consider the first true boss, and any boss that comes after the something's not right pop-up. And you know what? I'm just gonna play the commentary I had while playing to cover this section. I had to pause recording for a minute and restart because I needed to set my microphone up for this, but I really wanted to talk about what's happening in this fight. So this is the Dark Priest boss, I believe is what it's called. I mean, and I love the design of it. However, there's a couple of things going on here I really wanted to talk about, so I didn't forget about them later, and writing them down was not going to do it justice. First off, I love the design of this boss. That's not what I'm going to talk about. Elemental weapons. Every weapon you find in this has a chance to be one of a few different elements, be it, the fire, the light, the vital, basically in correspondence to like the stats and the various elements. And enemies can also be associated with an element. So this one's not an undead, I don't believe. And the reason I say that is because we had Edward. My plan was to switch Edward to the air hammer because the air hammer had some good stats and it's a level 2 weapon. He has a level 2 skill in that weapon. So I thought he would do some good damage. And then on the first attack, he missed. And I was like, oh, okay, that's unfortunate. However, the second attack was a double strike, and both of them automatically missed. And he was hitting before that. He's now hitting again. So I believe the boss is an air elemental type. And if that's the case, then it should be weak to earth. So, level 2 Flare did about 250 damage from Kodelka, who is built to be a glass cannon right now. All of her mental stats and things that affect her spell efficiency are up, but she can't take a hit physically. And she dealt 200 damage off of a level 2 spell. The level 1 Monolith spell, which is Earth Element, did a lot more. So that's just where I just wanted to talk about that so you guys could understand what was going on here. And James's whole thing right now, James's whole purpose here is just to heal Eddie. Just to heal good old Eduardo. Look at him go. But this boss is insane. We have Edward set up to be a literal tank, a punching bag, if you will. He can hit hard. That is not his main goal. His main goal is just to take all of the hits. If that is all he does, and if he never kills an enemy, I am satisfied. James is on support and utility. Edward is up front, being a punching bag and just taking everybody's attentions. And Kodelka is the sweeper. She's the closer. That's our girl, and here she goes. Let's see, because, yeah, I'm going to use Megalith again, and it's going to do a lot more damage than level 2 Flare for a lot less cost. This is like the first real fight we've had. Disc 2 has bumped the difficulty up a lot. And I think it's disc-based. I don't think they scaled enemies to players or anything. I think they just set enemy difficulty per disc. I'll figure that out later. We got 2 more discs to get through after this, but I wasn't exactly power leveling through disc 1. I just got 2 levels for James when we first got him and a couple of items, and we kind of just steamrolled through the rest of disc 1. So this is like our first actual challenge. And again, I just really enjoy the design of this boss. It's all fleshy, got the tendrils, very eldritch horror, something unearthed in the basement of this monastery that should not be seen by mortal eyes aesthetic to it. And, you know, we had the monolith bosses earlier, which were kind of cool, but they're essentially just less cool versions of the Eye of Sauron. So let's just see how this plays out here, because I guarantee you, look, Eddie's going to hit with this. And he's not doing a whole lot of damage, but that's fine. But he hit, and he's hit every single strike other than with the air hammer. So this is, and there's no way to check enemy affinity either. It's just, you have to figure it out as you go. Because if I were to guess, I would say this was an undead monstrosity, and I would try to heal it. And then I would screw myself. I wouldn't think, just by looking at this, that it's weak to earth element. But that's just me. It also does seem a little counterintuitive that air-based enemies are weak to earth magic, but... See, look at that! Monolith did 446 damage at level 1. Kodelka is a monster, and that's our little witch girl go. I just wanted to get that put in there because this is, you know, this was the turning point for this game. The Mad Fly was where Kodelka really clicked in my brain, and I was all in. The Mad Fly is also level 17, while we were only level 8. Moving on. Beating the Mad Fly awards us with the Icon's Ring. Another key item, we still don't know what its use is. Back in the room, with the boss defeated, holy water now flows and we get another full restore save point. We enter into the next area, the storage room, where we get a cutscene of James geeking out over the treasures that are stored here, before the group argues over whether or not the old caretakers are actually evil, or not.
How could such a kind and faithful couple be cold-blooded killers?
Checking a nearby chest, we find a bow gun. and it is strong, but needs reloaded after every shot. And it's here where I want to point out something else. Throughout playing Kodelka, a lot of the pickups in the game blend in really well with the pre-rendered backgrounds. So it can become very hard to tell if something is interactable or not, and usually resulted in me walking the length of the room, mashing interact to find things. One of the two doors here is locked with the red key. We don't have the red key, so we will need to come back here later. Probably. Maybe. If we remember. And I'm sure that has no bearing on future events. In the next room, we find a statue in the wall that prompts us by saying, if you pour water on it from above, you might be able to pry it out. So, there's our direction. Up. We take the staircase to the next floor, find a teddy bear with a letter sticking out of it, and we find the lion statue. Another key item. Man, we are collecting a lot of key items faster than we're using them. I sure hope we're not missing things as we go. We take a moment and we read the old letter, which is one page and is very cryptic. Let's just pay attention to the 4 bold-faced words here for later. Into the next room and we get another "something's not right" message, which you know what that means by now. Another boss already, baby! Let's go! We approach the altar and the fight starts with a literal Dark Young, a Lovecraftian monster, and I am immediately nervous. Edward attacks and only deals about 170 in damage, and so we start prepping spells. The Dark Young starts firing off a party-wide attack that, well, it really only affects Edward since his piety is doo-doo compared to the others. So once I see that, I am back to full confidence and competence. So let's do this with standard operating procedures, which are Edward tanks and eats all the direct hits, James plays support with heals and buffs, and Kodelka, our little glass cannon, fires off spells to find its weakness. Now, the Dark Young is technically a higher level than the Mad Fly, at 20. But it has less HP and can damage the whole party. We do find his weakness to wind, and the fight goes pretty fast at that point. Again, though, really quick, Kodelka, not very strong on the survival horror front any other time, except when you see that message pop up, and all of a sudden, a Chthonian nightmare is nibbling at your tootsies, giving you some chills. So, we level up to level 13 and continue on, keeping our builds pretty much the same. This time around, though, we get a new weapon from the boss, called the Evil Horn, a dark-type spear that looks like it was made from parts of the monster. And that's dope! I would love to see more of that as we continue. The party, utilizing parts of monsters or enemies like that, shows their scavenging side of supply acquisition, and it fits with the RPG side as well. We enter into the next room and are greeted by another FMV.
You always blame everything on the savagery of pagans. Are all men of the cloth like that?
It's senseless to tell you this, but the truth is...
What the?
We do see an oddly focused statue piece fly out onto the floor, and picking it up gives us Daniel's arm. Yet another key item. Okay, at this point we have quite a few key items that don't really feel key in any way other than just eating up my inventory space. We are about to run up the next staircase, but Then I spot what looks like a door and climb up the stack of crates to check. Turns out it is a door, and it loops us back to the caretaker's quarters from disc 1. We have looping level design now, and we can backtrack to previous areas. That has implications for later. The enemies here, though, are still the same level, so they are more of a time waster than anything else. We do climb up into the previously missed attic, and finally, we find the monastery map. I was really starting to wonder if that was ever going to happen, and it turns out I just missed it the first time. That's about all there is back here currently, so let's hit those stairs in the chandelier room. That's right. It's a boss. No, wait, we didn't get the boss message. Mini boss time. There it is. That's what it is. Now, having had 2 big scary bosses back to back prior to this, the Elias fight is more puzzle than it is power slog. Elias will spend his turns running between the crates and barrels for cover while shooting at you, which hurts a lot. And before you can damage Elias, you must destroy his cover, which is an interesting encounter instead of the same old run at enemy and throw spells loop that we are so used to at this point. Elias is also just a monster with his gun, so we have to get to him sooner rather than later. Once we make it to Elias, he goes down pretty quickly, and we get the red key from him. Talking to him after gives us this cutscene.
I'm a thief, and maybe I did drop a chandelier on you. But that's just because I wanted the whole pie for myself.
So you did kill all these people?
No, I swear to God. Not your God, bigot.
What do you mean?
It was the couple. The couple who look after this place.
What?
I'm telling you the truth. I've seen them. I've been down here a long time. Usually they use an axe when they catch thieves. The thieves come down here unarmed. They're stupid. They get caught from behind. I'd watch my back if I were you.
Unbelievable.
No, I'm telling you. The lucky ones die on the first strike. I've heard the others screaming through the night, clutching their bellies. I find them in the morning dead. No, I'm telling you, their fingers to their hearts, right through to their organs with the pain. Look, take it or leave it, but I'm telling you the truth. Those two, they're Satan incarnate.
What did you do that for? If our lives cease being threatened, it's a victory for God and all His glory, right? But if we go on letting them attack us, then the filthy, godless pagans win. Which would you like to bet on?
And so with that threat left up in the air, we assume James is cool with sticking with us and continue into the puzzle chamber. Finally, we are getting to some puzzles. This one being a door that is locked unless we get the correct pattern of steps. We don't know the answer, but we did get the red key, and we know that the caretaker's room is locked by the red key. So we backtrack all the way back, and inside we end up finding Valna's doll. Yet another key item. And by investigating the paintings in the room, Kodelka has a vision. We don't have any context for this right now, but if that changes, we'll come back to it.
This. The Princess Alice? She was a pleasure boat that went down in a terrible accident in the Thames. This one too. And this one. What's going on? They're all the Princess Alice. What is going on?
Not finding the answer to our current problem and running around the empty halls of the monastery, I did what I don't like to do and looked up the answer to the floor puzzle. Look, I don't like using guides, but I was running in circles, okay? And there isn't exactly any hints in the game for the answer location. So I just looked up the answer so we can get the recordings going, okay? All right, we're gonna move on. So entering the library, we find an ochre glass piece, which means we probably have more stained glass window reliefs coming up, but our inventory is full. So we need to dump something to pick up this key item. The only key item we have used so far has been the red key, and we have quite a few of them just sitting in our pocket. We check the cupboard in here, and it's locked with a Greek alphabet code that we don't know yet. So we leave it for now. Heading downstairs, we climb up onto a clock and see a large mural that is missing a piece. So we try some of our key items. And none of them work. Okay, one of my biggest complaints is this. In Kodelka, you find so many key items so quickly, and there is a long, long time before any of them become usable or might make sense with a puzzle or lock that you might forget that you have until you just click through them trying to find something that works. Key items also eat up an inventory slot, so consumables become a problem to carry and stock. However, as we also have noted earlier, if you build your characters to their strengths, then the need for consumables is not really a concern, which means that the inventory system is just a time waste, with it being limited in slots and taking the time to pick up key item. Inventory is full. Open inventory. Find consumable to either use or drop. Interact with key item and pick it up will become repetitive and annoying because of how often this will happen. So, we head into the next room filled with printing presses, and Kodelka's psychic powers activate in response to something.
Oh.
December 5, 1895. Rain. I found out that the
320 chickens and 43 pigs were purchased from a supplier in town.
Rain. Now I only long to sleep in peace with my wife.
Elaine, I just want to make you happy. Will you marry me?
Yes. That woman was Lane. She summoned me here.
We get a vision filled with symbols and a weird plant thing and a guy talking to Elaine, the spirit that reached out to Kodelka and the reason she is here at the monastery. And with nothing else to go on, we enter into the little storage room and after some more menuing, pick up the blue glass part. We get into another battle, and by this point we are level 18. Just so you can see the power curve, because I'm not going to show every random encounter or we would end up being here forever. But after the vision, something opened. It wasn't the clock wall. So before we leave to try and find whatever it was, we go into the storage room and put 2 of the 3 statues into the relief door. We're still missing the 3rd piece, but we have finally been able to use at least a couple of our key items that we have weighing our pockets down. We run all the way back to the plaster room, and with the holy water fountain in the room above running, the plaster is weak enough for us to pry out the statue from the wall. Now, back to the relief door. After popping in the last statue, we go into the next room, and we get the boss text pop up again, as well as making note of the weird-looking plant in the corner. We check it out, but nothing happens, so onto the altar and into the maws of the Chimera? Fitting, as the goat, the lion, and dragon statues led into this room. That's a nice touch. Standard operating procedures begin, and again, the design is not what I would expect when hearing the word Chimera. I would think of Edward. Okay, low blow, I know, I'm sorry, I had to, it's October. This thing has 3 long sinewy necks fitted with the shape of a goat, lion, and snake. Sitting atop a tentacled torso and just looks nasty. We have a much less severe level disparity now, as the Chimera is level 25, and we are 19 at this point. The monster can actually damage the whole party, but only Edward is taking triple-digit numbers, so this fight is again not terribly difficult. As much as I love the design of some of these enemies and bosses, I cannot stress enough just how trivial some of these fights are if you just build your characters right. The fight ends before too long without anything notable happening, and we make it to level 20. And by the way, here's the current stats of the party. Kodelka's strength and dexterity haven't been touched, and it's mostly her mental stats for magic. Edward has all physical bumps with a little piety, and James is kind of on the HP and mind stats as well. Honestly, with high enough agility, you could get away with not even needing James in the party, but oh well. We check the plant again, and James goes on a long tangent about finding books on alchemy in the library before acting a little shady about something not being on the shelf, and Edward questioning him on what he's really here for. James quotes Shakespeare back at him, and then the cutscene ends. Again, sometimes the dialogue is rock solid, with a performance to match. Other times it's this.
You read Shakespeare.
However, we do know now that James is here looking for something specific, and that he's on a mission from God. Back in the printing press room, we use one of the presses with our stone tablet, and the vibrations from the machine knock down a wall, as well as printing another layer onto our map for us. How nifty is that? It's a 2-for-1 combo. We find out that there are 7 floors and multiple basements to this place, but the highest floors look to be a tower structure of some kind. So we'll have to see how that plans out. Into the hole in the wall, and we find a disc, key item, and a door that leads to a locked gate and also into the church. We find the relief piece laying in the floor here and head into the room on the left, the stained glass room. We interact with the window, and we have 4 out of 5 of the pieces, which start to show us some Greek letters. Well, at the very least, we've freed up some inventory space by dropping those here. So we head back to the clock room, and we use the relief piece, which opens the relief up, and we enter into a new room with 5 symbols on the floor and a set of doors on one side. Stepping on a symbol plays a sound, and each one is different. interacting with the door just tells us it won't open unless the trick mechanism is unlocked. That means there is a pattern to the symbols and sounds needed to open the door. So, I run around on the symbols for a while and nothing happens. I also can't seem to find any kind of clue for this puzzle anywhere around either. So, after running around in this little room for way too long, I just do it again and we look up the answer to the puzzle. I know, 2 times. Benny cheated 2 times. Now hold on. Just wait. I looked up the answer to the puzzle. I put in the combination, and the door still didn't open. Because you need a certain item to make the puzzle actually work. You cannot just know the answer and move on. You have to find the item. You need the music box. Where's the music box, you might ask? And the answer is I had no idea. The map says I've been in every room at this point. So, oh, wait a minute. There was a second door that was locked by the red key. Surely that one singular room won't hold the answers to all of the questions I've had, right? Well, look at this. This one singular room held all the answers to the questions that I had. Back to the music tiles. Play the music box, and the doors unlock. Okay, I get it. I forgot something and it was dumb. Moving on to a FMV.
What? What is that? Is that just a mummy? Cross your fingers.
That was disappointing.
Holy Savior! The secret of the Fomors from the bottom of the sea. Immigrate!
For the rats.
We find out that James is actually here from the Vatican, searching for a stolen manuscript, and that the person who owns the monastery, Patrick Heyman, is the one responsible. Immediately after the cutscene, we pick up the green glass piece and head back to slap it into the window, giving us the code for that locked chest, as well as unlocking the locked door to the church. Another multiple stage combination here. We go back and we open the chest to find a stack of letters, all signed Sophia Delota. Reading the letters reveals that they were sent here from Sophia, who, as it turns out, is Charlotte's mother, who had to give up her daughter due to an arranged political marriage, but wrote her secret letters, which we know from our chat with Charlotte's ghost she never received. The letters span 12 years, and we unfortunately know Charlotte died here without ever knowing how her mother felt. These letters will be important later. Heading back through the church, we enter through the now unlocked doors and enter into the church nave, where we run to the far side of the room and get the message, "There's something moving behind you." And we cautiously turn around and proceed to the other end of the nave. Reaching the other end, we enter into a cutscene where we see that mass of thorny vines flailing about through a crack in the wall before we try to go back the way we came, and yet another scene plays out.
What's that bell?
Just the passing of another day. Oh no, today's All Saints' Day.
Their spiritual energy is coming together. What power? It's like a monster.
What's happening? This can't be. No! Koudelka!
A gargoyle splits the party, and we, as just Kodelka, enter into combat. So, we fire off a spell, and it misses. Well, let's try again. Okay, so we missed again. And, okay, so we cannot scratch this thing. So the only thing that we can do is run. Escaping from the battle immediately moves us outside and alone in the monastery courtyard. But this is a very important moment. This is a scripted fight you cannot win and you must run from. But it's a very important moment for one of the last things that we'll do before finishing the game. So, we move on to Disc 3. Disc 2 is the longest of the 4 discs, but most of that is just in backtracking and finding the puzzle parts to progress. So we end up finishing Disc 2 at roughly level 22. Just so you know. Proceeding into the courtyard with Kodelka, we come across some statues and... Oh, hey! Look! The icon items fit here. Man, it sure is cool that we've been holding on to them since Disc 1. This is what I meant earlier by Kodelka isn't that long of a game, and its key item system is kind of pointless. But with the amount of cutscenes that are shoved into this game, they needed 4 discs to cover a 10 to 12 hour title. We are currently sitting at around 8 hours by Disc 3 start, so story-wise, we are pretty close to piecing together everything. And we are just now starting to use all of these key items that we found since the beginning. And so, after placing all of these icons items on the statues, the water stops and a door hidden behind the fountain is available to us. We also find Kodelka's amulet that was lost in the opening cutscene down here by the fountain. And it's got some good stats. So, we enter into the fountain room and see a bloody guillotine before finding a ladder that descends down to an underground area. We climb down and see what looks like a torture room before Kodelka is assaulted by visions and the caretaker, Ogden, knocks Kodelka unconscious. We awaken to his mad ravings and we hear him shouting something about a boat. He makes mention of Elaine and his paintings, and he again goes on a tirade about the boat. He raises his axe in his lunacy, and Bessie shoots him to stop him.
Let's stop this now.
This is where we learn that Ogden was the captain of the Princess Alice before it sank, and so many lost their lives.
No matter how much you do.
We also learn that Elaine was the wife of Patrick.
What a waste.
Bessie then turns the shotgun on herself and the screen cuts to black at the sound of a gunshot. This whole cutscene is just one large exposition dump using characters that until now have only appeared one time all the way at the start. This section of Koudelka's story bothers me because it feels like they had bigger plans for the two of them, but couldn't figure out how to expand on them, or that the devs were confined with how much of the game there was already that took up 4 disks of space. And this whole plot line just feels rushed to completion and comes out of nowhere. It's just one big exposition dump, again, that tries to tie together the boat, the caretakers, and that they were employed by the owner of the monastery, Patrick, and his wife, Elaine, the woman whose spirit called Kodelka here. It's just a very messy start to the third act, but we'll move on. We pick up the shotgun and a blue key from Bessie's body before climbing back down the ladder to the torture chamber we were in previously. We walk around until we find a bottle of blood and a bent metal door. This is when we hear Edward calling out to us from the other side. We make a plan to try the other passageway, and the group tells each other,
Don't get killed.
Same to you.
We head through the door and into the next area, getting that boss prompt yet again. Now, I'm starting to sweat a little bit. I haven't built Kodelka to be particularly vital. And her glass cannon style really only works if Edward and James are in the front and middle rows to keep her from taking the brunt of damage. So this might be a tough one. This is the Goog. Level 25 and a mountain of health and strength. We hit it for about 1100 with fire, and then it throws rocks at us for, only 54 magic damage and 94 physical. I mean, any damage on Kodelka is not... Oh, that was over 100? And we missed with the spell? Okay, so this might be a bit rougher than I thought it was with getting multiple attacks in a round. We hit it hard with magic again, and we are now sitting at about 300 HP left. So, to the game's credit, we actually need to use items to stay alive here for the first time in the game. This just goes to show that no matter how safe you think you are, there will always be something to counter you to a degree. So, we smack the Gug a few more times with magic, and it goes down. I sure am glad that Kodelka is a magic monster, because the shotgun only doing about 200 a round would have been hell to get through that fight. We enter the next hallway and use the bottle of blood to make a statue bleed, opening up into a room straight out of nightmares. Fleshy vein vines pulsate along the walls while things in jars float and throb in the background. A near human face grows on one of the vines, saying the words, "The graveyard, St. Daniel's grave, and the grave of the girl." We proceed forward across the rickety bridge and out into the graveyard, where we find a grave for St. Daniel and are prompted to pray in front of it. We do so, and the old guy we found in the coffin earlier shows up in the middle of a religious rambling. We learn that this monk's name is Roger Bacon, and this is the best character in the game, by the way. All hail Roger Bacon, our Lord and Savior. We learn that he's been asleep for nearly 100 years in his coffin, and he unlocked the gate for us, and we can proceed forward back to our party. We pick up Vinya's doll and then head through the other gate we passed. Trying to check the other gravestones does nothing, but the one that sits in the stone construction turns out to be Charlotte's grave, and we pray at it quickly before continuing on. We head up through the gate and find ourselves in the triangle hall that had previously been locked. Running back in towards the library, we meet up with the other two, and a cutscene plays where Kodelka tells them about the caretakers and how Ogden was apparently trying to avenge the death of Elaine, which, again, is all a little fuzzy up to this point, but she goes on to explain more details that I don't remember Bessie saying. Also, James knew and was in love with Elaine at one point. So he joined the church to distance himself from her and Patrick. And there is also the question of why monsters are here infesting this place.
I don't believe
you should know very well what has been going on.
Let's just take the key we got from Bessie and find out, shall we? We could at least try to figure out this messy web of plot tangents. We run all the way back to the underground tunnels, and we see two corpses holding something. Interacting with them, we are prompted to return their dolls to them. Oh, so that's why we picked up the dolls earlier. Got it. All right. Well, we give them the dolls, and they drop the green key that we immediately use to enter back into the dungeon area. We head upstairs and go through a small door leading us into Charlotte's room, where inside Charlotte's room, there are nice dishes, a dining table, a fireplace, and rather well-maintained furnishings. But entering into the larger area, we are immediately attacked by possessed furniture. We again just have Edward tank for us while lobbing magical mortar strikes from the back row until they break down and we continue on. This fight really is nothing special, nor is it anything very difficult. The battles really are still mild at this point, and I mean, the most I could say about it is that this furniture was incredibly well made, as they have massive health pools. But that's about it. As soon as the battle ends, we are immediately thrown into another FMV.
Charlotte, do you know what these are? They're letters from your mother.
My mother? Letters? There's so many.
Did you know that your mother was a queen of Hanover? It seems that after you were born in secret, your mother was locked up inside Alden Castle. Even while she was imprisoned there, she sent many letters to you here in the monastery. Your mother loved you, Charlotte.
What? No, I can't take this now. She loved me? No, it's too scary. Hey, I feel warm. What's happening? No, help me. You're not gonna forgive her? You love me? I hate you. Don't pray for me. You.
Charlotte, how does it feel to know you are loved?
And with a slightly horrifying visual of a child ghost screaming as it is taken from the mortal plane to the next out of the way, that FMV is a special trigger for finding the optional letters collectible. If you don't, there is actually a Charlotte boss fight that happens. But it ends in the same result. We get the flare brooch after we make Charlotte pass on, and it's pretty good at boosting mental stats. Now, with Charlotte gone, the room takes on a warmer, yet more dull and somber tone. The change in scenery marking her crossing over is rather a nice little touch here. We exit out of the room and dig through a pile of corpses for some items. As you do, moving into Patrick's quarters on the other side. which is where the extravagance of the place is seen. Clearly. Entering into a side room, we find a gramophone, and, well, wouldn't you know it? We found that disc earlier in disc 2. So, we slap that bad boy in and get a hold of some research notes. Now, I'm going to summarize the contents of them because it's very lengthy. Clearly written by Patrick, the notes cover the events surrounding the stolen Emigre file, if I said that correctly. The notes explain that the file contains descriptions of an energy source that is the secret to existence, whose origins are the Druids' experiment that was taken from the Celts and were recorded by Alexander the Great hundreds of years before Christ. The Vatican had labeled it as forbidden text, and within the file, Wales specifically is referred to. The goal of this endeavor was for Patrick to be able to resurrect Elaine after her death, as well as noting that the monastery was built by Saint Daniel Scotus. Hey, didn't we pick up Daniel's arm? Patrick knew what he was attempting was heretical, but was pushed on by his love for Elaine. Patrick continues by expressing feeling haunting and eerie spirits around the monastery, but the power of resentful spirits are the fuel for this experiment, and that he plans to add more spirits to the monastery's hold. He goes on to explain how he found an artifact in the basement, a gold cauldron, and that it was necessary for the ritual. He then ordered Ogden to mass procure livestock for ritual bloodletting of the animals to fill the cauldron. A series of experiment trials are noted with failure as the result, but after many failures, Patrick resorts to capturing people and using them as the ritual offerings with Ogden's help. He goes on to ponder if his actions could ever be forgiven, even if he brings Elaine back to life. Patrick's entries show that he is struggling to commit to the act after the abductions, but finally he decides to go through with it, and although not a success, he decides to continue the process. Patrick rounds up 35 more individuals to perform 7 more experiments with, and continues. He even resorts to using the slave trade to acquire sacrifices. This process takes months and months, and even the ordering of special equipment to make the butchering easier. Eventually, the entries become just the number of bodies butchered and at what time of day. Where, finally, on All Saints' Day, Patrick feels it is time for the resurrection. After placing Elaine's body on the altar and performing the ritual, the results were not as expected. A tree of life grew out of the body, as he claims, but as the body returned, he could tell there was no soul within it. He finishes with asking God if this is his punishment for sacrificing nearly 200 innocent souls, and Patrick loses all hope. And his last entry points to him ending his own life, filled with the horror of what he had done. This makes much more sense to how Ogden and Bessie were involved, more so than the ravings of a madman and the cryptic messages of his wife. This being an optional series of notes to find, however, means that if someone playing this for the first time never found the disc, or didn't investigate the gramophone, there's a huge amount of context and backstory that would be missing from the narrative. Okay, that was a lot, so let's go ahead and look at the next section. We enter into the next room and, oh, another boss prompt. We step up onto the altar and battle begins with yet another eldritch abomination. This one is a bit hard to make out any discerning qualities on other than the mass of twisted human legs that compose the lower body. Despite his standard operating procedure yet again, but the way that we have leveled has made a lot of heavy magic enemies pretty non-threatening, which feels a little anticlimactic in boss fights, to be honest. But on the flip side, that also means that we are just a strong party ready to face down any and all horrors that the monastery can throw at us. I mean, the only one taking heavy damage is Edward, and his health pool more than makes up for his lack of magic defense. So before too long, the scapegoat gets scaped and we level up. Now, I looked up what luck actually did around this time and started pumping levels of luck into Kodelka. We'll go over why in a bit, but just know that I was very upset when I found out how luck worked. We exit the hall and stop in front of a painting of Elaine for a cutscene where Kodelka attempts to communicate with Elaine's spirit and succeeds. Elaine corroborates the events that have happened to both her, Patrick, and the caretakers before asking the group, and James specifically, to rid the world of the monster inhabiting her body and to burn it to ash. After her spirit fades away, we are left with a moving moment from James, and the group pushes on.
Wait, Elaine! God, curse! What a cruel world! I gave everything for your happiness, and now what am I left with? I have no meaning in my life. Damn it! What have I been doing with my life? Elaine! Elaine!
We head upstairs, and after entering the lab, step on a scale only for it to read 45 kilograms. We investigate a nearby fireplace and discover a secret tunnel, but we wait to climb down until we've checked the other rooms up here first. We climb a set of ledges, and I haven't mentioned it until now, but to go up and down stairs in Kodelka, you need to interact with them regardless of height. Even the little two-step stairs, and the interaction detection is, well, it's something else, let me tell you. Anyways, we finally managed to climb up to the top, and we run into Roger Bacon again, rummaging through piles of books. We have a conversation that is essentially a lot of,
well, I've been around for 600 years, and I've seen plenty of abnormal people just like myself.
My dear old man, might you be related to the great warlock Roger Bacon, who made such a name for himself in the 13th century?
You are very knowledgeable. Well, enough of this gossip. I've got some research to do. May I ask to be left alone?
Now, we leave Roger to do whatever he's going to do, and we go out and get into a fight where we start to test out the new strategy. New game plan alert! See, I told you we started pumping luck on level up, and the reason is, as we covered a little bit back on Disc 1, is that the higher your luck score, the better item drops you will receive. It isn't a guarantee that enemies will drop the rare gear, but if you don't have a high enough luck score, the rare items don't even appear in the enemy's loot pool. Which means, if you never increase your luck score, you will miss the chance to get high tier items completely. So, our new strategy is to whittle the enemies down to 1 and then have everyone buff Kodelka's luck for multiple rounds before having Kodelka score the last hit. Because loot pools are decided based on who scores the last hit. Or so I read. I do want to note, this is a very tedious process, and unless you really want the rare equipment or are trying to showcase it like I am, you do not need to do this. You can beat the game between levels 30 and 40 as long as your stats and spells have been leveled efficiently. We head back through the secret ladder and climb down. We find another scale. This time, since we picked up Patrick's memo, the scale tells us that maybe we should adjust the counterweight to reach 70 kilograms. Well, we know from earlier that Kodelka weighs 45 kilograms, so we add 25 to it, and the door opens, allowing us to grab the tinderbox key item. Some time has passed now, and so we decide to head back to see Roger Bacon again, and we hand over the research journal, asking the sage whether or not the ritual outlined within could actually be possible. Bacon says yes, for one, but bringing the body and soul back is not possible without very complicated measures that even the druids never discovered. Should we wish to purge the now named Tree of Life from the monastery, Bacon tells us that performing the ritual with a piece of St. Daniel could be enough to destroy the cursed foliage, and James gets an idea, but ponders to himself for now. Back in the underground passage, we push on and, finding the vestry, are greeted by another small puzzle. To unlock the next door, we must organize a set of little dolls in a specific way. Nothing complicated. No part hunting, just move dolls around and wait for the click. Once the dolls all face toward the center of the diorama, the door clicks open and we proceed into the nightmare room. Well, the first floor of the vestry, but you'll understand in a moment. The vestry has 3 areas: left, right, and center. To the left, there is nothing, and it just seems like a dead end because the door is locked there. In the center, there is a large set of doors, and to the right, it looks like there is a pulpit area. Investigating the pulpit area, we climb up onto a ledge and light the candles for some ambiance, if you will. Interacting with the ledge space again shows us an image of an ornate-looking sword and prompts us with, "Do you want to pick up the item?" Forcing my "don't touch the weird-looking object in a spooky place" voice right out of my head, I pick up the item, and we obtain Life Drinker, a very powerful sword that has HP drain as its special effect. We very quickly hit level 30 in a random encounter and proceed through the center doors, getting the "something's not right" text again. Climb onto the pedestal and, well, you know the drill by now. Here we are descended upon by the Dark God, or the Apostle. And this boss is something. I will not be playing the entire fight because this boss fight took me roughly 2 hours to beat in one sitting. The Apostle is a unique boss, of which I can only describe as a Lovecraftian angel figure, complete with multiple limbs, wings, a nail-embedded torso, and even a halo. This boss was the hardest thing I faced in this entire game, and not because it deals super high damage or has a lot of health. No. It's because this is a gimmick boss. You'll quickly notice that any standard approach to this fight will not work. The Apostle has 2 modes that it switches between in a semi-predictable pattern. In Mode 1, only physical attacks will work against it, while in Mode 2, only magical attacks will work, with the opposite either always missing, or, in the case of magic, healing the boss regardless of element. Now you might say, oh, well, that doesn't sound that bad. Just use what it's weak to in any given mode. To which I say, correct. But do you remember way back when we briefly discussed the agility stat and how you can get extra turns? Well, if you've been upping those numbers, this boss fight has high potential to infuriate you since the boss switches modes, from what I gathered, based on number of total turns taken. And sometimes, spells take more than one round to cast, giving the Apostle the high probability of switching modes right before the spell goes off because Edward took 3 turns in a row before getting back to your caster. I end up full healing the boss multiple times and then eventually find a way to cheese this fight and take the guesswork out involving James. Yes, our guy James, who is not particularly our strong character, gets his moment here. The boss has a laser attack that only fires when you have characters 2 rows away from it, hitting everything in that row. And I believe that row alone. And even if someone is right up on it, it tends to favor using that attack if someone is in row 2. So, we use all of our characters, set up Reflect on James, and keep re-upping it when it goes down, and we let the boss hurt itself every time it fires its laser at us until it drops. The Apostle is not a bad boss. Multi-mode bosses aren't a bad idea. Take the Lost Number from Final Fantasy VII. That is essentially the same concept as this boss, but it actually works because of the strict turn-based and mechanical limitations it's under, as well as not being able to heal it constantly. Here, if you up a stat that is important because of the way enemies scale, you actively hurt your chances by doing something the game nudges at you as being important. So about an hour and 48 minutes later, the Apostle finally goes down, and running back into the vestry, we get another cutscene. This scene is where the group is supposed to decide to stick together after everything to see this thing through to the end. But the dialogue is unintentionally hilarious here. There's a moment where Kodelka is giving Edward compliments while simultaneously berating him on being just an average guy. Like, just listen to this rallying speech.
I can manage on my own.
Don't kid yourself. We didn't come along just for your sake.
No, Koudelka, you should go back now. It'll be far too dangerous.
Edward, you're the one who should go home. You were not meant for this world. Granted, you are a good fighter, having had plenty of experience, and I won't deny the fact that you have the killer instinct either. But when all is said and done, you are an average Joe. I am not. I was meant to exist in this realm. It's the only place I can carve out an existence for myself.
Anyways, after that, James tells us that he thinks he can use the lab to whip up some nitroglycerin to blow open the locked temple doors, and he leaves. We fade out and get prompted to insert Disc 4 to continue. Once onto Disc 4, we are greeted by a cutscene in which James is mixing away the nitro, while Kodelka and Edward are throwing back bottles of alcohol, laughing, and sharing stories. A sharp contrast to the previous 3 discs of party dynamics. The two grow closer over the drinks before Edward sets Kodelka off a little bit, and we learn that Kodelka had a very troubled past because of her psychic powers.
The gypsy elders got together and decided to excommunicate me. I was only 9 then. Do you have any idea how a 9-year-old child survives without the help of a living soul? Treasures, you must be joking. Have you ever cried and begged for your next meal? Did you ever sell your body, seeking shelter from the frigid night air? I used to be just like Charlotte. When she cried and said, "No one has ever loved me." Oh, her words cut straight through me. It was me she was talking about. Just like her, I wish that everybody would die and harbored a hatred for all mankind. But you see, Charlotte has made her peace. And gone to heaven. Me, I'm still alive and still all alone.
And after sleeping off that tense moment, James lets us know that the nitroglycerin is ready to go, and we head back to the temple doors. We get a new FMV giving us a shot of the outside of the monastery before Edward cocks a pistol and fires a bullet, detonating the vial of nitro and blowing the doors wide open. We next see the party entering into the temple room where the vines of the Tree of Life are coiled.
It's amazing.
We step up onto a platform with a casket and get the message that there are marks on the floor showing the casket must have been dragged. We see a staircase off to the side, and once climbed, we find an organ whose keys are written in runes. We can only press 4 of them, and they are read people, secret, pain, and light. Now, we've seen these words before in the letter we found way earlier in the game. So, we read the letter and put in the correct order, and the organ begins to play a haunting, thunderous chord, while the sound of something scraping open is heard in the distance. Heading back downstairs, we now see that the casket has moved, revealing a staircase. In the next FMV, we find the roots of the tree as well as a corpse, to which James exclaims is Patrick. We then see James pouring some flammable fluid over the roots, and we regain control again. This here is the proverbial point of no return. So Disc 4 is really just the last stretch to the final boss, right from the start. But we haven't found all of the secrets yet. We still have the optional super boss to fight and the ultimate weapon to obtain.
Not asking for your help.
So I think it's high time that we pay a little visit to that troublesome gargoyle that caused me a whole lot of problems earlier and finally give it a piece of my mind. And it wipes the floor with us. This was our first game over screen of this entire playthrough. Okay, so the gargoyle is still way too strong for us, and I believe that it is time to do what all RPG players tend to do at some point in their game. We begin to grind for levels and a certain specific kind of item that I believe will make the gargoyle fight completely trivial if we can get it. I'm not going to sit here and show all of the grinding because that would take hours, but what I will do is explain the repeated procedures and the items I was hoping to find. So we run into a corner endlessly in the previous area, and with each fight we have the entire party casting luck up on Kodelka until we hit over 150 luck AP, giving us the possible item drops of the highest tier if Kodelka is the one to finish the fight. We then let her finish the fight with her magics, and we get the experience, the levels, and any items that drop. It is a bit of a long and tedious process, but while we are grinding, I am hoping to get a couple of scroll items to drop. Scrolls come in one of the elemental varieties, and with them, a character can use one in battle to immediately cast the highest potency version of that element's spell on an enemy. The potency being even higher than a maxed out level 3 spell. Scrolls are super powerful, but are exceptionally rare drops. By the time our grinding session is over, the party is level 60 with as high of HP as possible, if not maxed out, and we are carrying in with us 3 fire scrolls, 3 water scrolls, and 2 air scrolls from all of our hours of grinding. Now, with our levels upped and our gear ready, it's time to head back down into the church and face down this monster for the last time. The fight starts, and the gargoyle opens up by spinning, ready to cast his air magic on somebody, and we have Edward shoot it for a heavy hit to test the waters a little bit, dealing over 1,000 damage. We then cast Reflect with James and use a fire scroll with Kodelka, bombarding the creature for over 6,000 damage. We try a water scroll next and hit for 7,400 damage. The gargoyle cast his wind magic on James, but the Reflect sends 1,800 right back at it, allowing for us to throw another 6,000 plus fire scroll onto the thing. Now, the gargoyle has a massive HP pool for it to still be standing after roughly 20,000 plus damage. Another round, another scroll. This time, slamming into the creature for 7,300 damage and destroying the gargoyle, the super boss that wiped us out so easily the last time we were here. We get an agility idol for the trouble, which gives a character plus 3 agility permanently, if I remember correctly. So, not a terrible item, but it's kind of a little lackluster considering this is a super boss. So, that's a thing. Bragging rights and all that. With the gargoyle dead and our levels high, there's really only one more secret to find before we make our final push towards the end. That being, going back to the garden, finding the 5th statue, and with the gargoyle dead, claiming the Sword of Sacnoth. Yes, the ultimate weapon in Kodelka is named after the company that made Kodelka. Well, let's look at its stats. It's strong. And when examining it, we get this description. Legendary sword said to be made from the bones of a mighty evil dragon slain long ago. Its eye decorates the pommel. I suppose we'll have to test it out here soon. And with nothing else left to explore or find, we make our descent back into the cauldron of life and prepare ourselves for what's to come.
Grant us inner strength. Amen. Thou, who were created and born out of dust, now go quietly and return to thy Maker!
After using the arm of Saint Daniel, the evil roots begin to lash out at us, and after escaping outside, James throws the lantern back and ignites the monastery. With our back to the cliff, we have nowhere to go but up. The conveniently placed scaffolding that leads right up to the tower of the monastery. While running up the monastery scaffolds, we get attacked by vines, including one unique vine that is stronger than all of the rest and is also intertwined with the corpse of Patrick. We finish our ascent and enter back into the church at the 4th floor, where we see the flower bulb of the tree perched. When we approach, another FMV begins. The plant blooms, revealing the demon Elaine, and immediately Kodelka jumps into action to deflect the creature's Kamehameha blast away from the party with her amulet. The movements and the snapping of joints as Demon Lane chases the party are pretty disturbing, and again, the FMV qualities are fantastic here. The party runs up the tower, but Elaine catches up to them, and finally, a new banger of a battle track. We have the entire party set to the back row, with Edward equipped with the crossbow, and in this first encounter on the stairs, Elaine is immune to physical damage, so we set to work with Koudelka and James, casting their strongest spells. Elaine doesn't move, but does cast a wave of energy out to attack the entire party each turn. The party continues their flight, with the demons slowed only to be caught once again on their stairway just below the roof. The second Elaine fight, Elaine is no longer immune to physical damage, so Edward gets to throw some big numbers out. The demon still uses the party-wide attack, but is now not only immune to magic, but heals from it, so this is a Edward party at the moment. Elaine is not a particularly strong boss in either of these two encounters, but, and here's a big but, we power leveled a lot to be able to deal with the gargoyle. So this fight might go a lot different if you just go to the end and don't do any grinding for the gargoyle boss. With the second Eileen fight complete, and following the rule of 3 for video game bosses, we take the pause to equip Edward with the Sword of Sacnoth, and prepare ourselves for the final encounter atop Nemeton Monastery. Another FMV plays, and we witness the full transformation of the demon being, and the final fight begins. And we get another battle theme. Okay, hold on. After hearing the same music for 20 hours, getting not one, but 2 new battle tracks is such a reinvigorating touch to this game, and I wish there was just a few more for the other parts of the game to break up the monotony, because they are just great scores for the vibes here. The battle starts, and Edward is up first. And so, with Sacnoth in hand, our hero charges in and lets loose an assault of slashes at the beast, dealing close to 9,000 damage in the first round. Like, this sword is a beast. The creature lets loose a thunderous torrent on the party, but we push through, and with spells readied, we continue. Edward lets loose another heavy swing, and the creature is barely hanging on as we can see her posture change before Edward gets a second wind and immediately delivers 2 more powerful slashes, sending the demon into its death throes. Fight over. And in a nice little touch, the creature's death pose at the end of the fight matches up perfectly with how it appears in the FMV cutscene, and that's just cool. I don't like that's really cool planning on the developer's part. So after being enveloped in a golden light, the arachnid demon falls down back through the church and into the flames of the burning monastery. We get a short scene with the group at dawn, and then we roll credits on this gothic horror adventure.
I have seen the most interesting happenings. It would be a waste to go back to sleep just yet.
Hey, Kodelka. I wonder what she was about to say.
Dead people don't speak. It's just in your memories.
Huh? Is that how you explain what we just saw?
I guess.
Memories. Somebody told me that after a loved one's death, all we have is memories. In these, we maintain an eternal bond with the dead.
Oh, Kodelka. There's a lot to say here. Kodelka was an ambitious game taken on by a team that clearly had passion for the project. And honestly, nothing but respect for that. There is a lot of good here. The art direction, capturing the dark Gothic atmosphere, and the absolutely wicked creature design. The musical score and the ambiance heightening the setting, if somewhat limited and repetitive early in the game, for the majority of the game. The characters and their dynamics adding a bit of levity to this oppressive and claustrophobic title. The idea in general is fantastic. But there is also a good handful of bad that drags down the title. The survival horror elements get lost almost immediately as the JRPG side takes dominance, and the random encounters taking tension away from the player as opposed to adding and raising that feeling. The puzzles, while not bad in design, if you are mindful while playing, you are thrown key items constantly, and most of the time well in advance to when you actually need them. So there really isn't any trying to figure out what to do, as the player will most likely already have all of the solutions just sitting in their pockets from 1 or 2 discs prior. I loved playing through Kodelka for the first time. I enjoyed the setting, the campy dialogue, and the story itself was cool to experience. But I can point at parts of its DNA where it failed to deliver, even if I enjoyed my time with the game. The game garnered a cult following, and the team eventually went on to develop the Shadow Hearts series, which after Kodelka, I'm very interested in checking out. So, Kodelka. The story of a psychic witch and her 2 dim-witted companions delving into a haunted monastery. I will give it a...
Oh no! Today's All Saints Day!
out of 10. Thank you for watching. These kind of videos end up taking a long time to make, and I'm constantly trying to make them better, so if you did enjoy, please consider subscribing and hitting that like button to let me know if I'm on the right track. And lastly, if you want more game stuff, why not come say hi over on Twitch every Friday and Sunday at 6 p.m. EST. Or check out whatever weird rabbit hole I've fallen down over on the main channel. Links to all of that will be in the description. As always, take care of yourselves, and I'll see you all again soon.